Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Now, that is the love that a teacher needs, okay? I'm pleased and I have the great pleasure of welcoming each and every one of you to LinkedIn today. I would like to start with two reminders. One, if you are not aware already, we do have an amazing hashtag for all of our attendees to use. So please use the hashtags, tweet about the event, take pictures, let people know of the amazing conversation that's going to happen here today. And secondly, I would love to extend the opportunity for anyone who's in attendance today to please stay after. We will have a reception immediately following today's conversation. And with that said, I think it's time to get things kicked off. Again, I want to welcome you all. For those who I have not the pleasure to meet, my name is Jonathan Hill. I am a Media Solutions Manager for small businesses across North America here at LinkedIn. I also have had the pleasure to go through the Urban Alliance program, so I'm also an Urban Alliance alum. Thank you. We're here tonight, and we want to rethink the conversation around what does the future of work look like? We want to rethink and reinforce the importance of soft skills. But ultimately, we brought in all of you amazing leaders to think about how social capital plays a role in shaping the future to succeed. LinkedIn is thrilled to highlight our amazing partnership of the past 5 years. I think we've had about 19 interns, and all of them top-notch quality. But even within this partnership, it's also more fruitful to highlight Urban Alliance and the 2 decades of leadership in this space in shaping and helping grow the next generation of leaders. So thank you, Urban Alliance. We're proud to say that LinkedIn has been a partner of this foundation for 4 years, and we hope for 5. But on a personal note, as I said, as an alum, this is something that I can't say is not close to the heart. I welcome you tonight because this actually brings my professional life full circle. Growing up in DC, as I said, I participated in the Urban Alliance program as a junior in high school. I had the opportunity to start a bit sooner, and I had 2 opportunities to intern with this program. And going through the program, I thought about and I reflected preparing today that there were times I grew up in DC and I would go right past the Washington Monument. That there were so many amazing buildings and so many amazing things that were growing and happening in my own city, and I had no idea who was involved. I had no idea how I can get inside of those doors. I had no idea what work was truly being done to shape my future. And it was because of a program like Urban Alliance that I had that chance. I reflect on the fact that my mentors invested in me super early. And with that experience, it got me ready for where I am today. I reflect on the times that I had imposter syndrome and didn't think I was enough, and how my mentors were who truly pushed me. And lastly, I reflect on how organizations like the Urban Alliance Foundation make us a bit uncomfortable, have us think about what it truly means to involve someone from the community and what type of investment that will truly take. So now, having the privilege to actually mentor Urban Alliance interns, I might say it's been quite rewarding. I must also say that having 2 of the organizations that matter most to me here tonight is something that I could have never dreamed of. And as I talk about mentors, I think about 2 special mentors who are here today. 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to introduce the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden. And he was walking through the door. I was nervous, as anyone would be. And I had no idea the value that my voice had in that moment. The CEO of the Urban Alliance Foundation, Shawna, put her hands on my shoulder, and she let me know that my voice mattered just as much as his. She let me know that I was not small in that moment, that I was just as giant. And then I would think about my career here at LinkedIn. And sometimes you feel like the only. Sometimes you feel like you don't know who to go to. And I think about David. David said something to me that probably will stick with me for the rest of my life. He said that he continued to inspire rooms that I was not in if I continued to motivate people to think differently and act differently. He is in that room. He can take my message farther than sometimes I can on my own. But equipping me and empowering me to continue to motivate, continue to make people uncomfortable is the exact mentorship that I was seeking here at LinkedIn. To the both of you, I want to say thank you. And to all the mentors in this room, I wanted to say thank you on behalf of the youth that you're touching. We recognize that it's not an even playing field, whether in Chicago, DC, Detroit, New Orleans, and the list goes on and on and on. But it's people like you that are dedicated and committed to making sure that young people succeed, that wake us up and let us know that we have a fighting chance. With that said, thank you for allowing me to share my story. Let's get to the amazing attendees that we have speaking today. I have the great pleasure to introduce the Honorable Deputy Mayor for Neighborhood and Economic Development, Deputy Mayor Samir Mayakar. One, thank you for attending tonight's event, and I hope that the message that you share with this group will be one that sticks and one that grows. So thank you.
Jonathan, thanks for that introduction. I have to say, I know you're working at LinkedIn, but if you're ever interested in a job in City Hall, maybe that was the real reason I'm here, is to find you and bring you on the team. I'm serious. But thank you for that introduction. And I'm thrilled to be joining everyone here today to support the work of the Urban Alliance. And I can tell you firsthand that Mayor Lightfoot and our new administration here is committed to ensuring that all of Chicago's youth has access to opportunity, the opportunity that you just talked about. So on behalf of Mayor Lightfoot, I just want to say we applaud the work of Urban Alliance, the work you've done since 2012 to increase economic opportunity for the young men and women who need it most through internships, through mentoring, through skills training. And as you mentioned, I serve as our Deputy Mayor for Neighborhood and Economic Development. And I think you might be asking, well, why is he here? We're talking about youth development, but really, to me, it makes perfect sense. They're completely tied hand in hand. When Mayor Lightfoot launched her campaign for mayor a little over a year ago, she vowed that she would chart a new course for our city where the values of equity and inclusion would stand as our guiding principles and as our North Stars. That's why I joined her team. And a vital part of that is engaging and empowering our young people. She said then that we are living in one of the most important moments of our lifetimes in this city. Those of you who've lived here for a while know that to be true. And despite the challenges that we face, there's a lot of possibilities in this town. First and foremost are the possibilities that live within each and every one of our young people here, both downtown, our neighborhoods, all across the city. And unlocking that possibility, it can take many fronts. It happens by breaking our systems of generational inequality and disinvestment. That's what I spend my days and nights thinking about. It happens by listening to our young people from across our neighborhoods and communities. And that's really, I think, what we're here to talk about today. The future of work, what it means for our youth, our city's businesses, and the broader community. We're increasingly in need of experienced, skills workers to fill jobs in the region. But above all, we need a workforce that can adapt to whatever the future holds. And unfortunately, right now in this city, nearly 1 in 8 youth are disconnected, both from school and the workforce, and that is just simply unacceptable. These opportunities are not reaching the young people who need them the most. And I'm here to tell you that Mayor Lightfoot and I are absolutely committed to changing that. That's what she ran on. A couple of weeks ago, I had the honor of joining her as she kicked off our youth commission, a mayoral youth commission. And that's really designed to ensure that our young people have a voice. And actually just last week, we did a budget town hall where we actually had the first one only focused on youth to get kids from CPS, it was in a CPS school on the South Side, to give us their ideas on solving what you could call are some significant fiscal challenges. And they had really good ideas. I mean, youth think about things in a fundamentally new way, and they bring creativity to the table. But what's even more important is that we want them at the table because the decisions that we all make impact them and they impact their futures. So that's why we want to hear from our students and our young people to make the investments that we need to make as a city so that they can be successful. And effective youth workforce development programs like Urban Alliance are needed to ensure that our young people are equipped with the skills necessary to succeed in our workplace. And as we know, this training needs to start now, while our young people are in high school and they're still a captive audience and still imagining what their future can hold, what the possibilities could lie for them. We all have a responsibility to ensure that our students leave high school not just with a diploma, but a set of skills that will serve them in both higher education and in the workforce. And so I applaud Urban Alliance. I applaud its partners like LinkedIn. Where's David? There, sorry, right in front of me. Thank you for focusing on this important issue. As our economy continues to grow, we have to make sure that we're not leaving young people behind, and particularly those from first generation or low income backgrounds who don't grow up seeing a wider range of possibilities around them. One of the most inspiring things about my time as deputy mayor It's been seeing the unbelievable talent and potential our young people have. I do this series of rotating city halls in different neighborhoods, and it's just amazing to see our young people and what they can do. And time again, when I speak to them, I hear stories about how they're ready to work, to build, to create, to make the world a better place. And we just need to tee that up for them. I think we all saw some of that if you were paying attention last week during the student climate walkout. They're focusing on an issue that honestly, a lot more of us should have been out there in the streets with them, right? There were a couple thousand here in Chicago. And so Mayor Lightfoot herself, she always says this, we're living in historic times for Chicago's young people. And today, that's highlighted by the fact that our CPS students are achieving greater highs than ever before. Groundbreaking graduation levels, higher rates of going to college, higher rates and record-setting dollars of earning scholarships. And so we know that we have better talent in our classrooms than we ever had before. And so it's in those classrooms where we'll find the next big thing, the next big idea that can change the world. And we know that every young man and woman in our city deserves equal access to economic opportunity, but that's just not the reality today. We know that too often it's who you know that really determines where you end up. It's your zip code that you're born in that determines where you'll go. And I'm excited because I know today's discussion is going to focus on just how important a role networks play. And I'm actually curious, now I'm talking to an audience of LinkedIn folks, do you know what percentage of jobs are found via some sort of like online posting that the public can see versus by social networks? Any guesses? The LinkedIn people can't answer. Jonathan, you want to take a guess? You know it? It's 80%, 80% of jobs are determined by social capital, and that's why it's so important. And the other story I'll tell on that, on the importance of social capital, do any of you know who William Dawes is? So you've all heard of Paul Revere, and on the night that Paul Revere rode to warn the folks of Lexington and Concord that the British were coming, he went out and went on his journey. Well, there's another guy that same night named William Dawes who was tasked with the same thing. Now, Paul Revere went out and he warned people in each little town, and each of them had tremendous amounts of social capital and had their own networks. And so the word got out. He went to one and he got many, many responses. It was like organizing 101. William Dawes went out without that social capital to a closed network of people who all told each other. And so we all know Paul Revere and we don't know who William Dawes is. But that underscores the importance of social capital in society. And the reality is too many young people are closed out of that type of opportunity before there's even a knock on their door. And so it's really heartening to see what LinkedIn is doing. And we want jobs to continue to come to the city, and we want all of our young people to grow together. So I'm just here to say thank you. Thank you to the work that you're all doing. Thank you to all of you for being here to learn more about this important program, because if you participate in it, we know that the vision for a more equitable Chicago can be possible. So I'm looking forward to the discussion, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. And with that said, I have the great pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's conversation, the amazing Cassie Walker-Burke. She is a bureau chief of Chalk Beach, Chicago, and will lead a fantastic conversation with both David and Shawna. Let's welcome Cassie to the stage.
Thank you. Okay, great. Nobody's called me amazing today. So that's super exciting. Well, am excited to welcome two panelists to the stage for our conversation. The first is Shawna Smith. She's the CEO of Urban Alliance. She's going to come on up. And our second is David Cohen. He is the Vice President of Talent Solutions here at LinkedIn. So please come up and join us. Give them a round of applause. That other microphone, make sure we can. Okay, you got it. Okay, good. Okay, great. But before we were all coming out today, we were talking and found that we all three have liberal arts degrees. And so I'm actually going to throw them a little bit of a curve because we like to talk about our impromptu conversation styles. And I'll ask each of you the same question. Maybe as Shawna, we can start with you. But what is that surprising thing from your liberal arts degree, that soft skill, that has come, that's like your superpower, that has like come most in handy as a CEO?
All right, can you guys hear me? Welcome. So excited to be here, and thank you so much to LinkedIn and everybody for this wonderful welcome and all the work that everybody does. My soft skills superpower would probably be perseverance. Is that a soft skill, Cassie? You know, it is. And just, I think, learning to never give up, to keep going no matter what, to also use my resources wisely. So learning how to make something out of nothing, I think has gotten me much further than any grade that I ever got on any test or what have you, because sometimes those weren't always the best. And then you'd have to keep going. But I think that one is my superpower.
And that's a good one. David, what about you?
So hi, everyone. Welcome to LinkedIn. Thank you all for coming. It's great to have an audience like this here. I was a psychology major, and I've been told that my soft skill superpower is being very calm under extreme pressure. And as an organization that's trying to dream really big and execute against some massive ideas, sometimes there's some pressure associated with that. So it tends to be a useful skill at times.
I think that's a very good one. That's a very good one. So I'm the bureau chief of Chalk Beat Chicago. We are a nonprofit news source. We cover public education in 7 cities. We launched Chicago last year. And so we write a lot about youth. We write a lot about jobs. And one thing that we try to do with a lot of our stories is sort of clearly frame out what is the problem. And especially when we're talking about solutions and things that are potentially scaled in urban education, what are the solutions? But to understand the solutions, you have to first understand the problem. And so, Shawna, I'm hoping that you will take that for us and frame the problem for us of this conversation that we're having today about youth and jobs and the skills needed to succeed in the future.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start with the good news and then go into the problem. So we all know that the future of work is rapidly changing, right? We know that automation and advanced technologies are moving in rapidly, and we don't really know what that is going to exactly look like. What we do know is that a larger percentage of the jobs that are coming our way are going to require people to be adept in those kinds of advanced technological skills, whether it's programming, coding, and the list goes on and on. What we're excited about at Urban Alliance and what prompted us to write the white paper that we're going to be releasing on Monday about this very topic is that the little known sort of piece to that hasn't been as much at the surface of this conversation, or at the top of this conversation, is that not only are advanced technologies or skills in advanced technologies going to be needed, but soft skills are going to be increasingly and even more needed. So as the advanced technologies move in, some of what happens in a workplace is that it reorients them towards more cross-functional learning, towards more team-based learning. So you need folks who are going to be great communicators, who know how to work on a team, who can be adaptable, who can be successful in any kind of work environment. And so that was very exciting for us, because what we do in our internship program is we really focus on those soft skills very, very much so. Effective communication, conflict resolution, problem solving, critical thinking, staying calm under pressure. Those are the skills that now the research is more and more saying are going to give our young people the staying power and the competitive edge that they will need to challenge and come into this space where the future of work is very, very unknown. So that's sort of the frame. But the problem is, and this was touched on already per the deputy mayor's remarks and a little bit from what Jonathan said, the problem is, depending on where you live, who you are, what school you go to, your ability to access the right kinds of environments where those soft skills can be taught is limited, right? So we now know that soft skills can be taught. There was once upon a time where soft skills were thought to be innate. Either you knew it or you didn't. And now we know, no, that's not true. They can be taught, they can be developed, but there need to be resources associated with that. So the research tells us that schools that have higher populations of low-income students are going to be less likely to restructure their learning environments to provide the kind of learning and opportunities that students need to really build up their soft skills, right? So they don't have the capacity to do that kind of soft skills work that it takes. And just a little bit on what it takes. You need to be in learning environments that allow for observation of soft skills, practice, feedback, coaching, adaptation, reflection, and then opportunities to repeat those kinds of soft skills. So if you're in places or spaces or schools that don't allow for that, you are going to be left out of this equation. We are then going to be back to, furthering the income inequality. We're going to be back to a loss of individual human capital. We're going to be back to not being able to fill the gaps, the soft skills gap that businesses are facing into. So that is the problem, is the unequal access to the training and development of soft skills for all students, no matter who they are and where they come from.
And so, David, you're at the other end of the pipeline. Once Shawna's working with students, you're working with them once they're being hired. What's your view from inside a big company, and what are you seeing in terms of strengths and weaknesses of people coming in?
So we've got a couple of views. One's the view that LinkedIn has of our own employees, but because of the data set that we're sitting on, we also have a view into the broader market. I think Shawna absolutely nailed what the problem is and the challenge, and with that, an enormous opportunity. But even if you look at, the kind of the big picture of what's going on in the country right now, so it's historic unemployment in terms of low unemployment. And yet most companies are saying, hey, there's a huge skills gap, and there are lots of different kinds of skills gaps. So for example, some of the most in-demand jobs right now, or the jobs that are going unfilled for the longest period of time, the technical jobs like data scientist, software engineer, digital marketer, et cetera. When you look at some of those roles, what you see is that the underlying skill set that's required in order to do those jobs effectively has a very short shelf life. So one of the great challenges of technology is that it's moving so quickly that if you're a software engineer, for example, and your employer is looking for someone who can code in a certain language, build on a certain data set, use a certain type of infrastructure, all those technical backgrounds change about every year and a half. So the technical skills that a software engineer has today are literally kind of dead a year and a half from now. So if you're a university or a 2-year college that is trying to train people on technical skills, hard skills, by the time you've designed your curriculum, the curriculum it's played out. And so that's not terribly useful. And employers are starting to understand what the challenge is. What they know is that the soft skills are very, very long-lived. The technical skills have a very short shelf life. And so if you go out and you find people who have great soft skills, you can teach them the technical skills in real time. What you have a harder time doing is teaching them the soft skills, which if you don't come to the dance with the soft skills, it's going to be really, really difficult to learn those soft skills while you're trying to learn everything else that you're learning. And so, the view that we have is that if you look across LinkedIn's job portfolio, we now can see into about 20 million jobs around the world. And if you were to itemize all of the skills that are in the jobs, if you kind of scan all those jobs and you figure out which skills are the most popular or the most in-demand skills, 6 out of the top 10 skills are soft skills, the same ones that Shawna mentioned. And so what that tells us is that the world is looking for people with soft skills. And the world is coming around to the idea that the hard skills are learnable, they're teachable within the business environment, but the soft skills are harder to find.
So Shawna, you've been studying this problem, and you've had some experience with it as well because you run a robust internship program. Can you talk about that a little bit, and also talk about what are you learning in terms of things that are recommendations that you can make in terms of how we address the issue?
Certainly. Want to pick up on one thing that David talked about in terms of what you come to the dance with. So I think one of the most important things about our internship program that we've been running now for about 23 years is that it focuses on high school students. And that is sort of, as a society, that's the last public space that we have a captive audience of young people with which to teach them these important skills. And the research shows that it's much harder for them to learn after the high school years, that if they can get it in the high school years, then they're much more likely to enroll and even to graduate from college. So we want to use that space as best we can to really create the kind of learning environments that we touched on, that I touched on earlier. So that's really important that, we start early. And so that's one of the things about our high school internship program, Cassie. It's for seniors who are about to make that transition into adulthood, and really this is their last best opportunity with which to get to those skills. As the deputy mayor said, 1 in 8 young people here in this city are disconnected, meaning they've completed high school, but they're not connected to school or work after. And so if there's anything that we can do to prevent that, teaching these kinds of skills prior to completion of graduation is critical. But again, not just teaching, but also giving them the opportunity to practice them in real time, to get feedback from caring adults, to be able to see that behavior of what a soft skill looks like modeled in real time. But to answer your question about recommendations, many of them that we have and that are noted in the white paper that's coming out. But the two that I'll hone in on is, one is that schools and businesses can really benefit from coming together more around this issue, right? So you've got schools who say, we know we need to be teaching these soft skills. We know that social and emotional learning is really important, but we're strapped. We can't do it. Business is saying, we know that these are more and more critical, but how do you measure them? How do you even assess them? And so everyone's sort of understanding the need to do it, but they need to come together more to be able to find maybe the right vehicle or avenue by which to work together on this. We would opine and say that internships, apprenticeships, those create very awesome vehicles by which they could work together better around these issues and sort of solve, kill two birds with one stone. I think the second thing is we encourage and also remind that they don't have to do it alone, that there are organizations, not just Urban Alliance, but there's Europe, Youth Force NOLA, there's many groups in this room who know how to act as that intermediary with which to bridge the schools and businesses and take some of that pain away. Quite frankly, the businesses are trying to run a business, meet their bottom line. Schools are trying to educate. So there are lots of groups, and more, I think, experts in the space who can come in and help be that bridging function and support them, whether it's to help offer more apprenticeships or internships whereby these soft skills can be practiced and learned.
Yeah, I'm a former business editor who became an education reporter again after starting my career as an education reporter. And I can say that from when I was writing about business, it was the schools need to do a better job of preparing students for our jobs. And now that I write about schools, the schools are saying we are now being held to federal accountability standards and test scores that are impossible for us to meet in the hours of the day that we're in. And how do we have the time to teach calculus or basic math in some cases, but also teach children how to communicate? And I think there's a fundamental tension there. And I wonder, understanding that exists, recognizing that it exists and seeing that, what are some ideas, and either one of you can jump in on that, about how we kind of get past that? Because it seems like we are talking on two different planes.
Sure, happy to start. I think, Cassie, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the incentive misalignment that's going on between industry and the educational system. So educational system is designed to achieve certain types of goals. Those goals are very different than what the private sector and often the public sector is looking for. And so what can we do? I think inevitably, when there's a shortage of labor in the market, a shortage of not necessarily labor, but a shortage of skills, perceived skills in the market, then we have to work together to dig a lot deeper. And so I think the programs like Urban Alliance, programs like Rework, which is a Chicago-based program, One Goal, there's a whole host of programs where there are lots of people who don't have the requisite skills to just get started. They just need a foot in the door. They need a little bit of training. They need to bridge the gap, as the deputy mayor mentioned. And there are unlimited opportunities for us. You know, we're living in this kind of extraordinary time right now where there's record low unemployment, and basically every client that I talk to who's in the business of hiring, which is all of them, is looking around and saying, how do we find more people who can come in and be a part of our team? And so the creativity that's required right now is at an all-time high. And I think that really bodes well for helping us figure out how to stem this tide, because the skills that everyone's looking for, as we've covered earlier, just, you know, there aren't enough people with those skills. And so we have to get really creative. And I think, you know, in complementing kind of the whole programmatic element of getting creative and working together and making sure that we're stemming the skills gap, is that we're also finding that diverse teams are far more successful and produce far better results than non-diverse teams do. So you look at all these different characteristics, and they're actually just coming together brilliantly to make for an opportunity for us to reach out, get in touch with marginalized communities and people who haven't had the same opportunities and don't have the same professional networks, and bring them into the fold, thereby satisfying all of the different requirements and needs that we have in the private sector. But I do believe that the combined effort is going to be, you know, it's as important now as it's ever been.
Yeah, I'll just add that when you were asking earlier, what have we been studying or what have we seen? And I do think the field of social and emotional learning, which is pushing all of us to think more about not just what is learned, but how it is learned. And, you know, that may provide a bridge for schools and businesses if we can all just start thinking more about how learning takes place and not so much about what is learned. And don't get me wrong, you know, obviously academics and content's important. But if you could shift your mindset a little bit, that may provide an opening to get past this, you know, traditional historic debate of, you know, the school saying, this is what we're set up to do, and the business saying, this is what we need, and not really being able to break through in that conversation. But if we think about how learning takes place, it's hands-on, it's things you can practice, it's getting feedback, all of the things that happen in the workplace that students need to be really ready for anyway. And so if we can kind of all sort of circle the wagons around that point, that may be a way to break through a little bit. And we just have been excited about a lot of what the SEL field has been bringing forth about how learning happens per neuroscience and social science in different ways, that different breakthroughs that are happening that may be able to break this argument down a little bit.
So you're a national organization working in multiple cities. And so are you seeing cities that, Chicago are not, but you know, we all love Chicago, but that are doing this particularly well, or creating this sort of space where the conversation is happening between like educators and the business community, employers?
I think that that the cities that we work in, I think we actually are, you know, those of us in this space and a lot of the groups that are in this room, that's what we've been doing a lot of, is we're acting as that bridge across schools, employers, and students to have that conversation. So I would deign to say that all the cities that we're in, that conversation is happening on a regular basis. So between CPS and Urban Alliance and LinkedIn or other employers, and also in other cities that we work in, Detroit, Baltimore, Virginia, et cetera, that is one of the main things that we are doing, is trying to bring those pieces together and trying to set that table. We know that others are looking at this issue. I think the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has been doing some work on this. The National Governors Association is trying to build some conversations around this. So I think it is catching on. And I think what's groundbreaking, and what I want to applaud David and LinkedIn on, is that what the call that we always get from some of those entities is like, do you know any employers who can come with me and sort of help proselytize and say soft skills are important? And so I think we need more and more of those employers to step forward, and really applaud LinkedIn for doing that with us today.
Well, maybe we can talk a little bit about, there's a room full of people here who I presume can do some hiring, I hope. What are some baby steps that employers should think about in terms of maybe wanting to do this work but not really sure kind of where to start, knowing that there's a million other things we all have to do in the middle of the day?
I think it's hard. This is not an easy challenge to solve, but what I've seen a number of employers do is, bring in teams of non-traditional people and ask them to take on a project and ask them to, build skills in real time. So you think about bringing in a group of people, hopefully Gen Z, maybe millennials, and saying, hey, we've got a challenge that we, the middle-aged people in the room haven't figured out how to solve. Maybe it's a generational challenge, maybe it's a technical challenge. Why don't you guys get together? You all get together. I say guys because I'm from Chicago. It's not a gender thing. Why don't you all get together and try and help us solve this challenge? And we'll give you a project. We're going to give you the tools to be able to do it. We're going to challenge you with something interesting that you can bite off, and it's probably right up your alley. And then in real time, what happens? You're forced to deal with adversity, overcome challenges, work well in teams, be resilient, communicate effectively. Like, you can basically create the answer right in real time. And I think we're not great at this, by the way, but I think we are taking some intelligent risks. We have a program at LinkedIn right now that's called Project Unlock, and that project is designed to bring people from non-traditional backgrounds who've never worked in a technology company before, who have never worked in the function that they are hired to work in, and we train them for a number of months on the technical skills that they'll need. And we put them together in a group of like people in terms of people who don't have the traditional background. And we're seeing, surprising or not surprisingly, the same results after a full year from those people than we do the people who have exactly the same background that we have defined on the job interview, on the job spec. And so I think it's really just a matter of taking some intelligent risks, because what we're learning is those intelligent risks are really paying off markedly. And it's giving us the appetite to want to go much, much bigger. We want to do this. We started the program in Chicago. We want to do it everywhere. And so we're going to go to Detroit next, and we're going to hire a bunch of non-traditional people without technical backgrounds, without having worked in sales before, and we're going to hire them to be salespeople for a tech company. And we think that those types of programs will really open the door to not only helping do the right thing, but also solve the most fundamental challenge that we have, which is bridging the skills gap.
Can you talk a little bit about that hiring, outside of putting up a job posting that says like non-traditional person wanted? What does that sort of hiring look like? Is it more like going on the offensive than it is just putting up a posting and saying, hey, we're going to look at who applies? Well,
a big part of it is getting the word out. So as the deputy mayor mentioned, who is that's one of the biggest tickets to getting the job. So we've actually studied this as well. And we know that if you come from an affluent community, you are 3 times more likely to get the job with the well-branded company as someone who doesn't come from an affluent community. I think everybody knows that. What we also learned is that you're 2 times more likely to get that job if you went to a top-ranked university. And you are also 2 times more likely to get that job if your first job was with a company that people know, if it's with a brand that people know. So if you have one of those assets, you're multiple times more likely than someone who didn't come from someone with a similar background to get the job. If you have all 3 of those criteria, you came from an affluent community, you went to a well-branded university, and your first job is a notable company, 3 times 2 times 2, you're 12 times more likely to get the job than someone else. A lot of that just has to do with the fact that people don't know what opportunities are out there that are meant for them, or that they have an opportunity to learn, to be able to, win those roles, to be able to build their network. And so we're committed to trying to break those barriers. It's something that we call the +1 pledge. And the idea behind it is that there are 650 million members of LinkedIn. A lot of them have, a network connection with someone who doesn't have any of the assets that I listed. And if we can all help introduce those people, just one person, to someone who might be able to help them get the job, that helps them break through, that helps them overcome the barriers that they've were born into, then it wouldn't take all that much time before the challenges that Shawna mentioned very rapidly become closed. But we have to get pretty creative and we have to be pretty aggressive about it.
Shawna, I'm curious, you work with so many high school students across the country in different sorts of placements. What do you hear from them in terms of a successful experience? And on the flip side, what do you hear from them is an experience that could have gone better?
A successful experience oftentimes involves, or most times involves, the relationship that they have with the person on the job who is their supervisor, who we call a mentor, who is the person that is, or the people that are working with them on a regular basis and guiding them. And so the more that they are tied into getting that mentorship, getting also the exposure to new environments. I think what really goes well to the last point, when it goes well, it's because they've cracked that access barrier. They've now cracked into a new environment, a new place and when they look around, they go, oh, David's just like me, Sandra's just like me. Like I can do this and I can rise to the occasion. I have what I need. And then the more that they get that confidence, the more that they have someone that they're connecting to who's helping to guide them, they just take off. And so a lot of times what we see in the very beginning of the internship could be, more reserved and quiet, but then by the end, they are just, they won't stop talking. They're like, oh, I was at LinkedIn, I did this, I did that, and I learned all of these things. So there is a real transformation that happens when you're getting the exposure, plus the behavior modeling with the caring adult. You have the relationship. When you have all those components, a lot of development is unlocked for our students. When things don't go well, some of it are things that you've heard before around they weren't given challenging projects, or they weren't made to feel like they were a part of a team, because some of it is belonging, some of it is being a part of a team, having consistency, being in a safe environment. Can you guys imagine at 17 or 16 coming to a place like this every day? Right? You're coming from wherever you're from. You've got, even I come in here and you got free coffee. And you're like, it's a whole world, and I get snacks. And, people are laughing and joking at work and they're happy. And, for a lot of our kids, and I don't like to speak about our students as a monolithic group, so I'll speak about myself. Even where I came from, to see, to be in these kinds of environments, which are very different from what I was seeing at home or seeing in my neighborhood, it's life-changing. It's transformative. It's like, oh, okay, I can do this and I can compete, and I have all of the things that I need, and I know that now. And so then it just goes from there. So that's the secret sauce. And so I'm curious with David, sort of all of the things that LinkedIn is doing. The questions we ask back at the office are like, how can we get other companies to think that way, right? Like that this is, this curiosity about what can happen when you bring people together from different backgrounds to take on challenges, when you understand that folks who come from different places and are put together, there's an intrinsic and additional value that's added to your business and your bottom line. I'm curious if there's how do we get other companies there? Because I think sometimes they want to do it, but they might say, oh, it's just too, it's too hard. We have 10,000 things that are going on. And so what is the difference for how you guys have gotten there? And what is your sort of advice, and I hope it's okay, Cassie. I
Oh,
just wanted
please,
to,
go for it.
I was just really curious.
Go for it.
Turnabout is fair play, so be careful. When you start asking me questions, it's coming around. I mean, aside from handing Jonathan Hill a microphone and asking other companies to watch, I say that only half jokingly, but can you imagine if you saw a bunch of Urban Alliance alumni standing in front of the podium and you got a bunch of forward-thinking companies together and you said, this is what we produce. This is part of like our influence. I think it takes care of itself. I think we can prove our results just by sharing what successful companies have done and are doing and saying, we want to help you build it too. I don't believe that this is anything that LinkedIn owns. I think this is something that LinkedIn benefits from if we collectively own it across the industry, across the private sector. I would love to see a city like Chicago win by saying we've been the first to figure out how to really accelerate our progress against the network gap. And if we can do that, if I can, as one of the people who's responsible for an office in Chicago, get together with all the other people who have similar responsibilities to me and say, let's do this. Let's figure this out. And this isn't pie in the sky thinking. I think this is actually what's taking place right now. Some companies just don't have the resources. They don't have the ability to do it right out of the gate. But almost every company I talk to is saying, how are you finding talent? I'm starved for talent right now. And I say, well, maybe you're thinking about it the wrong way. And let's have that conversation. Because I think once this flywheel gets going, it's going to be really hard to slow down.
And what would your advice be? Because your point of view is coming from a large company, right, that has a lot of resources at its disposal, big brand name. But we know in Chicago, the majority of businesses are small businesses that maybe don't have the capacity for talent development. It takes a lot of time. What would your advice be for maybe somebody who's in this room who's at the helm or working for a smaller business or smaller enterprise? Like, what's that first kind of step forward?
So I think it depends on the size of the company. It's a hard question to answer because if you're a startup, you need people with very specific skills. Because as most startup owners know, I don't have time to train someone how to do something that I'm hiring them for. My wife is a small business owner. She runs an 8-person organization. She does not have the luxury of spending 6 to 12 months training someone on how to do something. She needs them to do that job on the moment that they walk in. If you're a 50-person organization or a 200-person organization, then maybe you say, hey, we're going to do it with one person. We're going to do it with 2 people. Maybe we'll work our way up to a class of a dozen. I think starting somewhere, depending on what size you are, that's the question to be asked. What I believe, what we've seen happen, and what I believe is going to continue to happen, is that companies who figure out how to crack the code on unlocking new talent pools because they're willing to take intelligent risks are going to be rewarded not only because they were able to do that, but because they were able to do that faster than their competitors. Because if I can figure out how to tap into an untapped talent pool, then I have access to a population of people that my competitors haven't figured out how to access. And if I get that right, then I've solved the number one challenge that most companies face right now, which is access to talent. So I think there's unlimited benefit.
Shawna, what's one thing you wish people knew about the students you work with?
There's so many things. I think it's simple. I mean, I think maybe that they're more like them than they think. That they may come from someplace different, they may look different, but they're in that early stage of trying to figure out who they are, who they can become, what their talents are, and all of us had to go through that process. And I wish they would look at it that way, as opposed to, just to be honest, sometimes maybe they look at them threateningly, or maybe they think they're just too different, or we're not going to be able to come together in the right way because of where I live and where you live, but instead to just look at them as young people that they once were, who were really trying to figure out who they can be. And I would want them to know that they most likely are like smarter than they are anyway. Just kidding. But no, that they have the potential and the capacity to pick up and to learn anything. I mean, I think, again, it's just opening that door, giving them that shot, giving them that opportunity to practice those soft skills, see them in action, see them modeled, and they will always rise to the occasion. Our students, again, once they get in the door, they blossom, they grow, and they become the thing that everybody wants to come back into the company again. So that's what I would want them to know.
And what advice would you give to somebody who says, I want to be a CEO? That sounds hard, but I want to do that, to a young person? Like, what is the pivotal thing for you, or that key piece of advice you'd give them?
Oh, yeah. Well, it comes back to a couple of different things. One, as David said, your network. I always say, I mean, look, being a CEO is just, it's being who you are, the best that you can be. And that's what it is at the end of the day, like taking whatever skills you have, growing them, and then that's going to manifest itself into the leadership role that you desire. But I would say that, keep up with your network. You never know who's going to offer you a job one day, come back into your life, everything comes back full circle. So you got to always show up, represent, keep up with your network. And I would say, and I always tell our students to sort of follow their instincts, follow their gut. But, I guess the thing, Cassie, like it's not rocket science, right? And that's what I think, again, having an early internship that's well designed, and that where you get some of those elements we talked about before, opportunities to practice certain skills, that when you can unlock that at a young age, it just lets you know that all of these things are achievable. Becoming the kind of leader you want to become can happen. Overcoming obstacles can happen. And so they just need that moment, to see what's possible. And like once that happens, everything else lines up. So, there's nothing special about, it's all hard work and just exposure and access in my humble opinion. But it's nothing special about me being CEO or David being, the head of talent acquisition here. It's just about the opportunities that other people helped us to access and unlock.
David, I'd ask you the same question. I imagine you're pretty good with your network just because of your job. This makes me think I'm terrible. I haven't checked my LinkedIn in a while. Sorry. But, what advice would you give to someone who is a young person who's like, I want to be at the top of a tech company and I want to do what you're doing?
Yeah, I have a few pieces of advice. The first is be unapologetically curious. Early on in your career, actually throughout your career, be unapologetically curious. I don't understand that. Can you help me understand that? And what is it that you do? Tell me about that. What's it like? Because what does a 22-year-old or an 18-year-old know about the wealth of possibilities that exist in the professional world? I knew nothing. I was a psych major, I was a Spanish minor, I graduated, I went into consulting. My father made fun of me. He said, "What are you going to consult on? You don't know anything. So you're going to advise multi-billion-dollar corporations on how to run their business?" He thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. So be unapologetically curious. The second thing that I'm often asked the question, if I were to give myself advice as a graduating university student, what advice would I give? And the advice that I would give myself right now or at any time is build the base of your skills. Don't worry about the promotion. Don't worry about the title. if you can avoid worrying about the money, and it's hard to do for a lot of people, see if you can put that off to the side for a little while. I believe that most people's career is probably a 50-year run. So what if you spent the first quarter or half just building an incredible base set of skills, and then the second half or the last 3 quarters harvesting that investment? Imagine where you could take that. Imagine the breadth of experiences that you could accumulate in the first 15 to 20, maybe even 25 years of your career, and what you'd be able to do with that experience for the back half of the career. And so I wrote a LinkedIn post about this. Happy to share it with all of you.
I'll have to check my LinkedIn.
But I think that we're teaching some strange behaviors to people who are coming into the workforce for the first time, asking them to ask for the promotion, go after the bigger title, do the next thing. I think that's a mistake. I think we're making a huge mistake, and we're giving bad advice to an entire generation. I think if we encourage them to be more curious and to explore all kinds of different things so that they had a wide set of experiences, we'd be doing them an enormous favor.
Closing thoughts. You want to take a moment, close us out, Shawna?
Well, I don't know. I think this has been a great conversation. I don't know. Come back to me in a second. Come back to me in a second.
No, I will. David, closing thoughts.
Shameless
Something
plug.
you wish people knew.
Yeah, shameless plug. I would love to invite you all to take the +1 pledge with us. Reach out to someone who may be in your network, maybe outside of your network, but who you know doesn't have a great professional network, and help them with that first step or that next step. Because if we do that in this room and we make a big, enormous stink about it, we're going to make a huge difference, and people are going to take notice, and then we're going to start to close this gap. And it really doesn't take all that much. It's a really easy first step to take. So thanks for the opportunity to advertise.
There you go.
Yeah, first time internships are important. I think I would just love to see more companies figure out how to really see this as a valuable piece that's going to really help, their companies, but also help unlock individual human capital. That's going to also help us to look at the, income inequality, and just I feel like, what David said about this being a very opportune time for us to look at talent differently and to, take some risks around who we bring into the companies and how we train them and help them access and unlock their talent. So just thank you for this conversation and for the opportunity to share our work today.
This has been a great conversation. Let's give them a round of applause. I think there is a reception now. I don't know who I passed this to.
Are we doing questions?
Again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming tonight. As we've said earlier, and this conversation has been amazing, we all have a role to play. No matter your title, no matter how small or big that you think you are, each and every one of us has a role to play when it comes to closing the network gap. As David alluded to earlier, we truly believe that 2 people with equal talent deserve access to equal opportunity. My question and my challenge to all of you is, what are you going to do about it? As he said, +1, make a post. You all heard the conversation. You all have the hashtags. Motivate your network to take advantage of the +1 pledge. Motivate your networks to reach out to Shawna. And if anything, motivate your networks to multiply the Jonathans that you have in the room. So thank you for the event tonight, and I hope you all enjoy the reception. Cheers.